Everyone is looking for the lightning bolt, that one moment that changes everything. They're scanning the horizon for a secret, a shortcut, a hack that will let them skip the process and jump straight into the payoff. But what nobody tells you is that the most powerful force behind any real success isn't some flashy secret at all. It's repetition, pure, unglamorous, mind-numbing repetition. It's doing the same thing over and over again until you don't just get good at it, you become it. Most people will never understand that, and that's exactly why they never break through. They get bored. They start something, feel motivated for a little while, maybe even make a little progress, and then as soon as it stops being exciting, they walk away. They assume they've hit a wall, that it's not working, but the truth is that wall was never meant to stop them. That wall was meant to test them. And what they don't realize is that the real reward lives on the other side of doing boring things thousands of times when it's no longer about hype, but habit. When I was just starting out, I wasn't sitting around waiting for motivation to strike. I was busy filming videos that got zero attention, writing titles that didn't convert, editing thumbnails no one clicked. And it was frustrating not because I failed, but because I failed over and over and nobody even noticed. I didn't have an audience, I didn't have validation, but I did have one thing most people never bother to develop. I had patience. I was willing to do the same boring thing every single day with no applause, no success, no recognition, just a dream in my head and the discipline in my hands. Here's what you discover really fast. Motivation dies quickly. You can't rely on it. You can't wake up every morning expecting to feel like showing up. You've got to build systems that work even when your emotions don't. The repetition is what keeps you sharp. Repetition is what exposes the flaws. You start to notice patterns, what works, what doesn't, not just from books or advice, but because you've seen it in the field in real time with real stakes. That's what people miss. They think mastery comes from learning something new. But true mastery comes from repeating the old so often it becomes automatic, instinctual, and you can't fake that. You earn it one boring rep at a time. Think about the greatest athletes, the best creators, the most successful entrepreneurs. They don't skip the reps. They're obsessed with them. The best basketball player still practices layups. The best content creator still studies thumbnails. The best CEO still looks at spreadsheets. Not because they're exciting, but because those fundamentals are what everything else is built on. The world sees their highlights, their awards, their massive wins. But what they don't see are the lonely hours, the brutal consistency, the dozens of drafts no one liked, the footage that never got uploaded, the moments where quitting would have made perfect sense but didn't happen. That's the edge, that's where you get the separation, because most people won't do it. They'll look at the repetition and say, it's too boring. They'll say, I already did that yesterday. And I get it, it's not glamorous. Repeating something day after day can feel like digging a hole that never ends. But what if I told you that boring is a gift? What if I told you that doing boring things consistently is a cheat code in disguise? Because if you can stick with boring, you unlock a level that's invisible to everyone else. When you do something every day, you start to evolve without even noticing it. Your brain rewires. Your senses sharpen. The time it takes you to complete something gets shorter. Your instincts improve. You don't have to think about every move you start knowing what comes next, and that knowing that automatic response is how you win in high pressure environments. People think they'll be able to rise to the occasion when the moment comes, but you don't rise to the occasion. You fall to the level of your preparation, and preparation is repetition. It's built in the dark. There's this moment you hit when you've been doing the same thing for long enough that it doesn't feel like progress anymore. That's the most dangerous moment because it tricks your mind. It makes you think you're stuck. But that moment is actually the turning point. It's the part where your momentum is building beneath the surface. You can't see it yet, but it's happening. You've been chipping away at something invisible, and right before the breakthrough, it feels like a breakdown. That's the final test. That's where you double down. That's when you dig deeper, not because it's exciting, but because it's necessary. I used to count how many hours I spent on tiny details, not the big picture, the tiny stuff. The opening second of a video, the speed of a cut, the pitch of a sound effect. It's easy to overlook that stuff. Most people would. But I knew something that most people never learn. Every small improvement compounds. 1% better every day isn't exciting, but it stacks, it builds, and suddenly the gap between you and the competition is a canyon they'll never be able to cross. Not because you had a genius idea, but because you kept swinging the hammer when they put theirs down. The reason repetition works is because it teaches you the value of invisible growth. It makes you understand that just because you can't see progress doesn't mean it isn't happening. Think about how muscles grow. You don't leave the gym with new biceps after one workout, but if you train consistently, same movement, same sets, same grind over time, your body transforms. Same with your mind, same with your craft. Same with your impact. Repetition is also what separates luck from skill. Anyone can get lucky once. Anyone can hit a fluke video, a surprise win, a viral moment. But can you do it again? Can you replicate success? Can you hit the mark so often that it becomes your standard, not your surprise? That's what repetition teaches you. It turns moments of greatness into a way of life. It makes success feel normal, not accidental. And here's the best part. You don't need anything fancy to start this. You don't need money, you don't need gear, you don't need permission. You need commitment. You need a plan. You need the guts to do something simple over and over again until the results become impossible to ignore. The repetition doesn't have to be perfect. You're allowed to mess up. You should mess up. That's part of the game. What matters is that you come back and do it again and again and again. I promise you this: if you can fall in love with repetition, if you can find joy in the boring, if you can learn to appreciate the grind that nobody claps for, you'll gain a power that almost no one has. You'll become unstoppable, not because you're the most talented, but because you're the most consistent. While others are sprinting in circles looking for the next best thing, you'll be marching forward, inch by inch, in the same direction, and that's how you win. Not with a bang, but with a quiet, relentless, unshakable commitment to the fundamentals. So if you're in the middle of something that feels boring right now, good. Stay there. If it feels like you're doing the same thing over and over and no one cares, perfect. Keep going. If you're watching others succeed while you're still repeating the basics, smile. You're on the right track, because those boring reps, that's your edge. That's the secret. That's the foundation of every great thing that's ever been built. When people finally see the results, they always assume it came from some big moment, some breakthrough, some magical flash of inspiration. But they never look at the trail behind it, the hundreds, sometimes thousands, of tiny, repetitive steps that built the path to that one shining result. That's the part no one wants to study. They just see the explosion, not the fuse, and the fuse, it's made of monotony. It's stitched together from days that feel the same, actions that feel mundane, decisions that seem small. But if you're smart, you realize that's where all your power lies, not in the big leaps, but in the daily inches. It's funny, because the world is obsessed with momentum. Everyone wants to feel like they're constantly accelerating, constantly achieving, constantly climbing. But real momentum doesn't feel fast when you're inside it. It feels repetitive, it feels boring, because that's what real growth actually looks like. It's one video uploaded when nobody's watching. One email sent when no one replies. One idea tested that no one reacts to. It's building momentum that isn't visible yet. But just because others can't see it doesn't mean you're not gaining speed. The problem is, most people can't sit still long enough to build anything real. They're addicted to newness, they want variety, they get bored too fast, so instead of building depth, they build wide. They spread their energy across 10 different things and master none of them. But depth is where the real treasure is. Depth is found when you stick with one thing long enough to understand its layers. It's when you've repeated a process so many times that your brain starts to predict the outcome before it even happens. That's when you gain control. That's when you stop reacting to the game and start shaping it. I'll be honest with you, there were days I didn't want to do it. There were weeks where I thought maybe all this repetition was pointless. But I kept showing up, not because it was fun, not because I felt like it, but because I made a deal with myself. I wasn't going to be average, and you don't beat average by showing up when you feel good. You beat average by showing up when you don't. You push through the fog, you work through the static. You perform when the crowd is gone. Because when you do that enough times, something incredible starts to happen. You start creating your own energy. You stop needing motivation. You become self-powered. There's something powerful that happens when you begin to trust the process more than the result. That's what boring repetition teaches you. It forces you to let go of needing immediate feedback. It demands that you become your own validator. When you stop obsessing over whether the results are fast enough, you free yourself to focus on making the work better. You focus on sharpening your craft. You start refining instead of rushing. You stop comparing and start perfecting. And the crazy part is that's when results start showing up. The moment you stop chasing them directly and start honoring the process, the results begin to chase you. But that takes time, that takes stubbornness. It takes a kind of mental toughness that isn't sexy, isn't marketable, but is absolutely essential. You have to be willing to keep going when no one's clapping. You have to get good at tuning out the noise, the opinions, the trends, the distractions, and get dialed in on one thing. Most people quit right before they get good. They get to that first level of skill, they plateau, and instead of doubling down, they bail. They think they need a new strategy, a new niche, a new audience. What they actually need is another 1,000 reps. Repetition teaches you the difference between temporary failure and permanent defeat. When you do something long enough, you realize that failure is not the end. It's just feedback. It's just the world showing you what doesn't work so you can move closer to what does. Every failed attempt is a blueprint. Every boring attempt is a brick. Stack enough bricks and you build a fortress, but only if you don't stop stacking. Only if you commit to building something real, one boring block at a time. There's another thing repetition gives you that nobody talks about: peace. When you're locked in on doing the same thing daily, you don't waste energy guessing. You don't waste time making decisions over and over. You simplify your life. You create rhythm, and that rhythm becomes a foundation you can stand on. It becomes your edge because while everyone else is scattered, exhausted by choice, and overwhelmed by variety, you're grounded, you're focused, you're executing the plan, and that consistency becomes your advantage. People think creativity and repetition don't mix, but that's completely wrong. Repetition doesn't kill creativity, it sharpens it. It gives it structure. You do the boring stuff enough times, and your mind starts to see new patterns inside the familiar. You start discovering new angles inside the old routines. That's how breakthroughs happen, not from chaos, from discipline. You've got to master the rules before you can break them. You've got to understand the system before you can innovate within it. And the only way to understand something deeply is to immerse yourself in it again and again and again. It's like building muscle. You don't grow because you lifted a weight once. You grow because you kept lifting it long after it stopped being exciting. Same with skill, same with mastery. There is no shortcut. There is no magic bullet. The people who win are the ones who can stomach the boredom, who can outlast the urge to quit, who can do the unremarkable work for an unreasonably long time. And that's not about talent, that's about choice. I remember days where I would edit a single video for 20 hours straight, not because it was special, but because that's what was required. I'd rewrite the same sentence a dozen times, replay the same clip over and over, tweak the timing by milliseconds. It wasn't glamorous, it didn't feel heroic. But those tiny tweaks, those boring decisions added up. That's what separates good from great. Not sweeping gestures, but microscopic improvements multiplied by time. Here's the secret nobody wants to admit. Boring is sustainable. Flashy isn't. Anyone can go hard for a week. Anyone can sprint when the mood is right. But can you walk every day? Can you keep going when it's inconvenient, when it's frustrating, when it's quiet? That's the real question. Because the long game is always won by walkers. Not sprinters, not stunt performers, walkers, the people who show up every day and do the work whether they feel like it or not. And you want to know what's crazy? After a while, the boring stuff stops feeling boring. It starts feeling powerful because now you're not doing it for validation. You're doing it because it's who you are. It's your standard. You start to take pride in the process. You start to own the repetition. And when that happens, you become dangerous, because now your performance isn't dependent on how you feel. It's baked into your identity. You do the work because it's what you do. No excuses, no drama. Just consistency. You'll start noticing something else, too. The people around you will begin to fade, not because they're bad, but because they won't have the stamina. They'll quit when the novelty wears off. They'll bounce to the next trend, and you'll still be here, still building, still grinding, still doing the same thing, only better than before. That's when you realize boring was never the enemy. It was the filter. It was the test. It was the gatekeeper between mediocrity and mastery, and you passed it. So when people ask you, how did you get so good? Or what's your secret? You'll smile, because you'll know there was no secret. Just 1,000 silent days, 1,000 boring choices, 1,000 moments where you could have quit but didn't. That's what it takes, not luck, not genius, just relentless, focused, unapologetic repetition. This is how you get good at anything. This is how you become undeniable, not with hype, not with luck, with discipline, with consistency, with boring, repetitive effort, stacked day after day after day. That's the secret power nobody respects until it's too late and you're already 10 miles ahead. In the end, what separates the ones who make it from the ones who don't isn't talent, luck, or timing, it's tolerance. Tolerance for boredom, tolerance for repetition, tolerance for grinding when the excitement disappears and the applause fades. Because while everyone else is chasing the next shiny thing, the real winners are quietly doing the same thing they did yesterday, only better. That's where the transformation happens. That's where greatness is born, not in the spotlight, but in the shadows. Not in moments of hype, but in the silence of consistency. If you can learn to fall in love with the process, not just the results, you become unstoppable. You become the kind of person who doesn't need motivation, who doesn't need an audience, who doesn't need perfect conditions. You become the kind of person who builds empires out of routines. And while the world watches, wondering how you got so far, you'll know the truth: you didn't get lucky. You just kept showing up long after it stopped being fun. That's the secret, that's the difference, and that's what most people will never do. So embrace the boring, honor the grind, and understand this. Doing the same thing over and over again with intention is not insanity, it's mastery.